Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to CitA Tech Live. Challenge, Change, Learn. Presented by CitA, Ireland's premier multidisciplinary network. I'd like to start by just introducing myself. Alan Hoare here from the School of Surveying and Construction Management in TU Dublin. I'm also one of the founders of the Construction IT Alliance. Before we formally start, I'd like to thank our sponsors, our platform sponsors, Arup, John Siskin's Son, Ditech, ProCAD, and Celebri. Also our gold sponsors, Current BIM Management, Invicara, Cosmos, and SIS. And of course to our exhibitors over the next, on Friday in the Gibson, BlockDocs, the Build Digital Project, Engineers Ireland, FutureCast, and Lean Touch Solutions. And of course to our media partners, Irish Building, and the contributions from CitA SkillNet. So the next slide, please. So over the past 6 months or so, we've been engaging with the industry, in particular our members, to try and find out what are the challenges that you're currently facing. And of course, there's no time like the present to have the challenges that we're facing in construction. It's really unprecedented. So what we're looking at over the next 3 days is the problem of resource scarcity and increased costs. Tomorrow we move towards decarbonizing our industry and the need for a more circular approach to construction. And on Friday, we'll be looking at procurement reform. So the first 2 days will be presented remotely. And on Friday, we hope that you might take the opportunity to join us at the Gibson, where we'll be talking about procurement reform. But if one just looks at that image there on the right side, you will see that there's many intersections between these challenges. So for example, if we're looking to decarbonize and we have resource scarcity, we should be more reusing, recycling, working in a circular way. If we're going to procure for a decarbonized industry, we've got to incentivize the industry to, have low carbon footprint. But above all, what you'll see over the next 3 days is one single, I suppose, denominator for all of this. And that's the need for a collaborative approach. An example of that would be in procurement, where companies like those companies that we'll be talking today are experiencing significant costs increase and risks associated with in construction in that respect. So clients could look certainly at collaborating and sharing that cost, sharing that pain. So this is the big message, I suppose, from CitA Tech Live, a collaborative future. So the next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide, the program slide, please? Thank you. So today is about the big challenge, tackling resource scarcity and increased costs. And a great deal of thought went into this program, because what we have is a perspective from industry initially. Firstly from Eoin McEnery, an associate from McDermott, and then from Stephen Foley, head of BIM management from Colin Construction, who'll be setting the context and explaining how they are managing to advise their clients at this challenging time. But then we have, the digital piece, how digital can assist in ameliorating, resource scarcity and managing increased costs. So we're hearing from Brennan, CEO and founder of LifeCost.com, Dr. Ahmed Hassan, a postdoctoral research fellow from TU Dublin, and also from Sharon, Dr. Sharon Richardson from Databricks, who's a data, AI, and decision strategist. So I hope today you get a real insight as to how we can tackle this issue, and there'll be some tips and tricks along the way. So I'm going to ask for our first presenter, Eoin, to share his slides.
So as Alan mentioned, the title of my presentation is Adapting to an Inflationary Market, which I think we can all probably relate to of recent times, and it's something that's definitely live and current challenge. And before, I suppose, I look at the here and now, I just thought it'd be useful to recap over the last 2.5 years or so, and just document the events that have kind of the industry and so the other industries have gone through, and appreciate all the turbulence we've had to try and absorb. So, I mean, as you can see on the screen, from like lockdown number 1 back in March 2020 to Suez Canal blockage in March last year, followed by the price hikes the middle of last year, and more recently the outbreak of the war in Ukraine. It's been an eventful period, to say the least. And I suppose in parallel to the various events or milestones noted, is a lot of other things have happened. So people have switched jobs or industries for one reason or another, especially in the construction industry. Workforce have relocated either to other parts of Ireland or beyond for various reasons. More globally, a hard approach from China in terms of zero COVID policy, which we depend on them quite a lot in terms of materials and other bits and pieces. And as well as that, obviously, a rise in energy costs, which is a big player in the construction industry. And then I looked at, I mean, on a macro level, how do this relate to the challenges we're seeing? So recently, the RICS did a survey amongst its members to identify what are the biggest factors, I suppose, holding back the industry from getting back to pre-pandemic levels. And I suppose, no surprise, over 90% of respondents identified the cost of materials as the main challenge. And in addition to that, over 60% identified labour shortages, material shortages, skill shortages, as well as financial constraints. On top of this, the IMF in a recent report identified inflation expected to remain elevated for quite some time. So the issues we're seeing are in a global context, but they're very much reflective of what we're experiencing here at home at the moment. So what do these challenges look like in terms of actual costs and all the rest of it? And I look at this in two parts. Firstly, on commodities and some key ones which our industry relies on. So if you look at aluminium and copper, which over that period since the first quarter of 2020 are in the high 70s of increases, albeit the last few weeks have shown a little bit of positivity. Both are in big demand at the moment as commodities, especially copper with the growing, I suppose, electric car industry. Lead is, I suppose, to show a more modest increase, and probably is not too surprising given that length of time. Next one is nickel, which nickel has been the most volatile of, I suppose, the main commodities. To the point that a lot of traders actually suspended trading on earlier this year. Just over the last 6 months, the turbulence has been caused quite a lot by events in Russia, Ukraine. Russia being in the top 3, I suppose, producers of nickel in the world. Next one, zinc, used in galvanizing metals and various other uses. It's been a steady upward increase since kind of Q3 last year. And then two that I suppose are a bit more, we'd all pay a bit more attention to in terms of rebar and scrap values, which have been very volatile and over that period have shown significant upward pressures on the costs, albeit again in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a little bit of a cool off, but from a very, very high level. I suppose the purpose of this graph in its totality just to give a snapshot of some of the input cost pressures which the industry is trying to deal with. Some sectors rely on some of these materials or commodities more than others, hence why I suppose costs and the cost pressures do vary from sector and project and so on. So then commodities, I suppose, is no surprise that they fluctuate. It happens even in normal times. But then what does that mean in terms of building materials? So here take kind of 9 core materials which we use in the vast majority of projects in some shape or form. And over that same period, just see what impact the various events and challenges have had on it. So concrete has been relatively stable, all things considered. More recently, some spikes due to carbon taxes and energy and transport costs. Steel, so directly linked to the commodity pricing, has been very volatile and well documented in the media in terms of the pressures that's been under. Brick and blocks, again, I suppose is in the lower in the category, but is showing sizable increases. And again, as of the last 6 months, is subject to that energy, fuel, transport costs that kind of the industry is trying to manage. And then we get on to timber, another one that's been very well documented. I suppose middle of last year, there was nervousness about supply, both nationally and outside Ireland, so within Europe, which I suppose supply seems to be less of an issue now, but the costs are continued, I suppose, to be at a high level. M&E materials, so I suppose M&E materials relies a lot on the different parts of, with aluminium, with steel, with copper, so all those are inflated. So the parts to make our central plant, our ductwork, our cable, and it's resulted in the cost pressures and the M&E increase. Now, some people might be a bit surprised that that's not a little bit higher. It is average, so I suppose it depends on some projects more than others. Next one, so the aluminium part of windows and cladding, so directly related to the aluminium commodity and that input material cost, so shown marked increase. So plasterboard, less so, again, more recent times, just due to energy production costs. Sanitary ware is a bit more modest as well by comparison. Insulation is into the higher category. So there's a couple of challenges in insulation due to the availability of some of the materials to make insulation, so some of the chemicals and laminates, but also, again, going back to the production and transport costs. So similar to the previous slide where we looked at commodities, this one, but people can relate a bit more to where the graph just illustrates as a whole the pressures that the projects are trying to absorb and the challenges. And I mean, as I mentioned, the starting majority of these materials would be used across the vast majority of construction projects. So back in January, we, McDermott, did an exercise to understand, well, what does these increases mean? So if concrete increased by 10% or steel increases or drops, what does that actually mean to an apartment building? So we took a project that was tendered in Q1 2020, so pre-COVID, pre-lockdowns, priced in so-called normal times. We repriced it in January using prices, we'd say from Q4 of last year, split it into labour and materials, apply the various adjustments to the main materials to see what the outcome was. So, and we broke it into how much the 2-bed apartment increased since pre-COVID. So effectively 2-year period. You can see that the graph building here, so the main movements has been period. The overall increase is about 14%, or circa 27k, just to build on average a standard 2-bed apartment. Now that 14%, this was what our analysis told us, the vast majority of it was in 2021. 2020 was a challenging year with a lot of lockdowns. There was a little bit of opening up of the industry, but the vast majority of that was in 2021. Now, if we were to do a similar exercise now and capture the change of the last 6 months, this figure would be further north. So what's happening in the market at the moment? A lot of things actually. We're still trying to clear a backlog of projects which have been hampered by COVID lockdowns and restrictions. The market is extremely busy at all levels, from main contractors to specialist contractors, and I suppose they're stretched and trying to cope with the volume of work. There is certain issues around supply in certain areas of materials and labour, which I'll come to. We are seeing a widening viability gap especially on residential side, which I'll touch on in later slides. Lead times being extended due to various disruptions, order backlogs, and fortunately, some industries have lost certain manufacturers that have just ceased production because of, I suppose, the volatility and increased production costs. Labour, huge demand for labour. We saw it in the survey in the earlier slides that that's not just a problem here in Ireland, but it's a problem across large parts of the globe at the moment. We are seeing, I suppose, new projects and projects progressing through detailed design and going out to be tendered, but it's a lot more of a challenge to convert those actually into contract awards because of the difficulties around pricing at the moment. Single stage tendering, so there is a reluctance on the market because of, I suppose, resources and people trying to allocate resources to projects where you may have a 1 in 4, 1 in 5 chance of actually being successful on. So definitely seen a lot more negotiation on in certain areas. But these negotiations are taking a bit longer than maybe they traditionally would because we're trying to agree a deal, I suppose, from our side that best protects our client. But I know from contractor side, they're trying to protect their interests and the risks involved. Insolvency, look, the industry is facing some solvency challenges due to, I suppose, projects and contracts that were placed maybe middle of last year or prior to that, and they're trying to absorb the cost pressures that are currently being experienced. There is an awful lot of uncertainty and nervousness around prices and lead times, and unfortunately, there will be cases of where projects have run into some challenges that dispute resolution will probably be on the rise. So what has actually been done to tackle some of these challenges? Firstly, at a regulatory level, the government over the last number of months have brought in some initiatives to help in certain areas. First one is through public sector contracts, so the inflation cooperation framework. This is in addition to some changes that were brought in January to help with some inflation. But I suppose the main crux of this this framework is any contract signed after the 7th of January, I believe, there's a mechanism there for potential recovery of up to 70% of inflation costs on behalf of the contractor, and it's linked back to CSO indices. So that's only been announced in the last couple of weeks. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. Another initiative announced by the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage has been the pre-Connell scheme, which is more at the developer level of projects, private developer level, that is. So it's helped to fund the viability gap, which only appears to be widening at the moment in terms of delivery, the cost of delivery of building apartments versus the market value of those. So it applies to Dublin and the four major regional cities. And in short, it will basically fund developers where there's a shortfall between the cost of delivering the apartment versus, as I said, the market value of it. And there are other initiatives and studies which we are aware that are being instigated at the moment, and their sole focus is aimed at reducing costs for the delivery of projects, with a special focus on I suppose, housing and residential type projects. So that's at some of the regulatory initiatives been introduced, but then at our level and day-to-day and projects, some things that we've seen introduced over the last 3 to 4 months on a project-by-project basis. And I've looked at these in 2 categories. So one in the kind of design or pre-construction stages, and also in the construction stage. So the design stage, we're definitely seeing more awareness around designing with inflation in mind, and that might be around material selection, around making sure that more than one contractor or supplier can actually deliver that product to that detail. More conscious around source and materials, so where they're coming from. Are we at risk if we put all our eggs in one basket? Engaging to specialists, subcontractors and main contractors in earlier stages of negotiating and placing early orders with these people so the prices can get locked in. In in isolated areas, we've seen certain clients actually approach certain suppliers directly to hedge against future price increases. So it might be materials not needed for another 12 months, and actually they go and they place the order now with the hope of fixing the price. More flexibility getting built into contracts, so maybe paying gain mechanisms and other areas where risk is better allocated. And looking the backdrop of all this, ESG is something that is only going to grow legs and become more and more prevalent. Once we get to site or projects that are on site, there is I suppose, not a change, but just more added level in terms of awareness and trying to de-risk projects. So we definitely see contractors trying to understand again where the materials are coming from. Is there resilience in the supply chain? If that particular supplier can't meet the program, can't meet the deadlines, is there a backup plan? Trying to secure major items early. The labour issue, which I mentioned earlier, so labour-intensive trades, take brickwork, for example. Vast majority of residential projects have brickwork on it. The labour pool isn't getting any bigger, but the pipeline of work would appear to be the same or getting bigger. So it's identifying these early and trying to make sure that actually the labour can be sourced early enough, or we look at alternative details. In certain areas where we're seeing more upfront discussions around delays, trying to be a bit more collaborative in terms of trying to manage or mitigate those delays. Appetite for risk, I suppose, from the contracting fraternity is definitely changed, and that having those discussions with clients earlier and trying to best allocate that risk depending on who's best to manage it. Just what's above are some approaches we've seen on our projects over the last 3 to 6 months, but they do vary by sector, by client or project, and the conditions in which that project has been tendered. That concludes my presentation on adapting to the inflationary market. Hopefully you found it useful, and thanks again for listening.
Thanks, Eoin. I think you've done a super job in setting the context there. Thank you. And actually, I was just looking at your website earlier today, and I see that you are a data-led construction consultancy. So, you're advising your clients as to the current data. And I think we'll hear a lot about data over the next 3 days and the power of data analytics and real-time information. So thank you so much. On now to Stephen. So we've got the client's perspective or the construction consultant's perspective, that interface between client and construction consultant. Now, most importantly, we're going to hear from a long-standing respected company, Colin Construction, and Stephen Foley, who's at the coalface of this bid management. So, Stephen, if you want to commence your presentation and introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Alan, and thanks, Eoin. We do a bit of work with Eoin's company from time to time, and they are one of the more progressive houses out there. So it's great to hear their perspective on how things are going. I think I'm sharing the wrong screen here. Give me 1 second here. So my name is Stephen Foley. I'm the head of the bid department in Colin Construction, and I've been with the company for up to 7 years now.
Stephen, you just need to share your slides. Your first slide. We can't see them. Sorry.
Okay, can you see that now?
Yes, we're good to go.
Great, thank you. So I'm with Colin about 7 years, and in those 7 years, we've seen an awful lot of change in the market, from somewhat depressed to rising to COVID and to where we are now, which is a bit scary. But look, it's at the bid face where I work. We come up against these challenges every day as part of our decision-making process in respect to what jobs we go after and what jobs we don't go after. In most cases. So I suppose what I'm here to talk about today is how we might use digital tools or digitization to help the risk management process, and it'll touch on some of the topics that we're talking about here, and maybe help you understand a contractor's perspective in some regards, and also maybe help us all understand that if we leverage digital tools, it makes processes more efficient, and it drives cost reductions in general. And then the whole live data thing and pulling live data off jobs is massively important. So I won't take you through the introduction, I'll just go straight into it. So in the industry, as we all know, the things that we're constantly looking at from a risk management perspective the safety, the operational risks. Safety being obviously at the actual head of everything we do in Colin. It's our highest priority at all times. We want to make sure everyone goes home safe and has a nice, happy, safe work environment. Operationally speaking, you're talking about your teams, the operational risks on jobs. We get more into that in a little while. The commercial risks, of course, things like we're talking about today, rising costs, supply chain and labor, materials availability, logistics associated with that. I suppose the whole labor problem we have in the industry, and can we leverage things like modular construction to help with that labor shortage, which indeed we should be doing, and we are trying, but it's slowing the uptake. Data complexity in the industry is an increasing challenge. The amount of information we're being fed, particularly at the bid stage, to analyze and to de-risk and to set requirements for the project from, is just increasing on a bid by bid basis. There's an inconsistency in application there, I would say, across the board. We're lucky with our surveying body in Ireland and the UK. They're quite consistent in the approach, but everything else is somewhat of a free for all, depending on who you're dealing with. So it's a challenge. Contracts and legal, like every other contractor in the country, we have our own in-house legal team because we have to. We're working in different jurisdictions, we're working with many different forms of contract. So we have to look at that as well. Design allocation, design responsibility, who owns what, pushing that stuff onto the contractor designed elements, are all major factors in our risk consideration when we're bidding jobs. Liability, the end user's requirements, the funder's requirements, collateral warranties, insurance liability, insurable elements of the building. Can designers get insurance, and so on? Huge problem at the industry at the moment. Stakeholder management. Again, when you're on a job, it could be the local residents, it could be council, it could be statutory bodies, it will be your contractors, your subcontractors, and it will be indeed your own team, and the impact that can have on the delivery of projects. And then the statutory requirements. I suppose the introduction of the BCAR Act arguably put some manners on things in regards to building control, but it's very much on the contractor side to make that all compliant in conjunction with the design teams. But it is really an ongoing challenge because of the data complexity associated with all the various elements in the building. In regard to risk itself, what's really worrying me as a risk manager, as a bid manager, obviously we have inflation, we have labor shortages. Contracts are really worrying us because there's a tendency to push as much risk as possible onto contractors. We would argue that risk should sit with the people that are best placed to manage it, and that's certainly not always the case on contracts that are very, very heavily amended, and it does drive cost up. The risk pot on projects is getting larger all the time, and that can often affect our competitiveness, and indeed the competitiveness of our supply chain, and indeed the competitiveness of the wider industry, thus driving the cost increases. Safety always worries us. We are in a situation where the market is very busy. People are working long hours. Keeping people safe is a key metric for our business. We don't want anyone to get hurt, full stop. It's not acceptable to us. And it's an increasing challenge because of the shortage of labor, the availability of skilled labor, and again, the fact that everyone's in a general rush, so it's not easy. Operational risk. Have you got the people? Have you got the plant? Can you get them? If they go, can you replace them? The site logistics, in regard to site-specific items, the watering, ground risk. It's endless, world and international impacts. We had COVID, we had Brexit, and now we have the war in Ukraine, and it's driving up, all these things are feeding into the increase in costs. And then, of course, the one that really worries is just the supply chain itself, the availability of our suppliers, materials, composite materials as well as raw materials. And it's an ongoing challenge. So I would say the increasing complexity of risk in our industry is a major driver for increasing costs, and in many cases, the competitiveness of contractors. And we are finding that challenging at the moment and been very cautious in what jobs we pursue. So what's the benefit of using digital tools to help us manage our risk? So, I mean, from a start point, I would say information management. If you go digital, if you're fully digital, it's easier to sort through, manage, and identify, for example, requirements on a project, or specific risks or specific items, or indeed gaps if needs be, in designs or in specs or in drawings or even in our own assessment of risk. Customer interface. Well, what I mean there is how we interface with the designers we work with. The Mitchell McDermotts of the world. How they perceive us and how we're able to interact with them in regards to how the information is delivered to us, and how we deliver back to them. So 99% of bids now are digital copies. Everything's issued digitally, and we submit digitally. We're very rarely asked for a hard copy anymore. And then we have to reformat how we deliver our bids, because they're no longer bound. They're now in a PDF, so there's more graphic design required, more compilation of bids required. Productivity. The hope with digitization is always to improve productivity, and that's what we find when we go digital. There's a period of pain, and that's been talked about before in many other scenarios. I won't go into that here, but there's always a bit of a period of pain where you're bedding in the new system, where you're training people up, but invariably it pays off within a few months. Cost. Digitization, one of the main targets should be to reduce your cost, be it your operational cost, the amount of time you're spending on sorting through data, sharing data, that kind of stuff. And we definitely find that in the administration side of things, going digital has made things way, way more efficient. Decision making, allowing people like me to make a decision in regards to our approach to ground risk on a job, our approach to certain packages on a job, or the acceptance of design risk. Having all that information, available to me, at the literally the touch of a button, and being able to sort through it in a reasonable manner using whatever tool we have. Normally our CDE for projects allows us to, really look through stuff and look at the right things. You can't beat experience, but these things really facilitate a quick review. Again, the data management piece, the sorting of data, what's in, what's out, revision management, all that kind of stuff is for sure more efficient when you go digital. The process agility around bids, we have to be very agile. We're invariably under-resourced because it's a peaks and troughs industry. It tends to be very, very busy, maybe a little bit quiet and extremely busy. Now, for the past couple of years, it's been extremely busy, full stop, but, and we have increased our team accordingly, but it is an ongoing, challenge. So, if we have a digital process that facilitates agile management of different types of projects, different types of bids, it facilitates efficiency. Sustainability, then, many of our bids, it's now a requirement, if we're talking about sustainable elements, we're talking about things like LEED, we're talking about things like well, and that information issued digitally, and allowing our team to kind of analyze this, remotely with people all over Europe to look at this stuff first, and that sort of collaboration piece, indeed bringing in external consultants when we need to, is a massive benefit of the change to digital. I suppose automation then, so this is a challenge, in the industry, automating risk management. You can't press a button and say, give me, a risk register for this job. It's not going to work that way. You'll always need people to do it. But you can certainly draw information from pools or wells of information, from live jobs or from previous bids, and indeed from, industry experts like the people that are on the call today, Mitchell McDermott. So it is a case that, digitization in general is really to reduce costs, improve productivity, and increase automation. And that's what we're striving towards in Colin. We have a ways to go, but we are working towards it. If we take a look at one particular risk that normally bothers us a lot is ground risk. In many, many cases, in fact, in most cases, we are asked to buy out or to take on fully the ground risk on a project. And, when we're looking at ground risk, there's all these things you see here on the screen: site investigation reports, BIM models existing and proposed, underground scans, water table, utilities data, temporary work designs, dewatering strategy. Some are coming from the designers, some are coming from the clients, some are coming from us. And how does digitization help us? Well, effectively, all that information can go into a BIM model now. And instead of looking at 20 different sets of drawings or 10 sets of drawings, if you like, and a couple of different specs and stuff, I can see the majority of the information I need to make certain informed decisions or to consult with indeed experts in our business to brief them quickly in one place, in a Navisworks file, for example. And, we can do our little clash detections, and it often helps us to, spot logistical problems with bills. It's not obviously a silver bullet, but it certainly facilitates a quicker response and allows us to be a little bit more clever about what we're doing. So, I mean, if I was to recommend, an approach to digitization, I would say that the process itself, risk management, it's made of many sub processes, and I feel the best way to really push it on in your business is to look at a gap analysis of each particular sub process, where you review where you are at the moment, you consider where you want to be, the digital state, you note the gaps in between each one, and then you analyze the digital means to fill the gaps. And for the most part, we can do that in-house, but we do need to bring in people sometimes to help us out with that, because there's some aspects of the digital transformation piece that we just don't have the knowledge in-house to do. And then obviously, once you've gotten to that point, you review the impact, the resources, training, tools, costs. Do we need a new common data environment, a cleverer tool? Do we need to invest in a risk management software package? I've not found one that works for us yet, but I'm sure there's one out there. What kind of training impact are we going to have? Is there going to be an ancillary training impact? Are we going to have wasted money on other training for people on different platforms? What tools do we need? Do we need physical tools? Do we need new tablets? Do we need new phones? Do we need new laptops? IT infrastructure and so on. And then obviously cost associated with that as well. Then once you've done that on an individual basis for each of your, major risk categories, so you said your operational risk, your health and safety risk, your commercial risk, you categorize the sub processes and map out what the overall risk process looks like. You create a network diagram, if you like, and then you consider the data outputs from each one. So what are you looking to get out of this? If you're going to sit in front of your managing director, what are you going to say to that person about this particular risk? What do they need to know to allow them to make an informed decision based on your expert advice as a risk manager? From there, you develop your risk KPIs, which is really the key performance indicators that tell you how your project is doing or your business is doing. And then you draft your risk dashboard to allow the senior management team, to take the entire risk profile of a project to our main board and column group to review what we're doing and to decide if it's the right thing to do. Now, we're doing pieces of this. It's not there yet. We've a ways to go. But that's the general approach we're trying to take to get things more efficient and to inform our senior management team in a more efficient manner what risk is acceptable. It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to replace the knowledge and experience of people. It's going to facilitate better and more consistent decision making. If I was to tell you what my wish list was from a pre-construction perspective in regards to digital risk management, I would say this to you, these items here. I would say define data inputs, so identifying all the pieces that come in on a bid and being able to categorize them almost automatically or semi-automatically into the ether of the bid, the overall common data space of the bid. Data analytics tools, so being able to utilize a smart tool or semi-smart tool that can look at our data and say this is right, this is wrong. If a document is supposed to be let out in a certain manner, say for example a BIM execution plan, we can check it for compliance with the relevant standard 19650 and decide if that's working or not, and we can identify a gap there, a risk there. We can raise an RFI, or we can put in place a mitigation, be it cost or be it an exclusion. A library of specific risk and mitigations. So we have a live library that we keep, but an awful lot of it is in people's heads as well. So getting that information down in a manner that's usable and analyzable, if you like, and then developing a mitigation strategy. Requirements management. So a tool that can help us with requirements management, where we can go through documents and look up key terms and develop a response to each requirement and categorize them in a smarter way than somebody sitting down with a Word document and going through it line by line. Define risk categories, tolerances, and residual risks. So having a tool that will help us kind of automatically generate the risk associated with a various area. And then obviously the smart part, comes from the person that's looking at the risk, or indeed many people are looking at the risks. But having a tool that will prompt that process would be very, very useful. Mitigation monitoring. So when we've made a decision to make a mitigation, we monitor how it was received by, for example, the designers, the client. And then when we go to site, we monitor how it's actually working and how it's impacting on the job. A risk assessment toolbox. Basically a tool for if we invite a contracts manager or an engineer or a consultant into the team to work on a bid, but there's a toolbox there for them to use to analyze the particular risk we're asking to look at. Mid and high level decision making stage gates. So a tool that requires someone like me or one of my team to make a decision and then present that decision to a higher up person as needs be. So a sort of a program linked decision making tool in regards to risk stage gates. Live project risk data input. So we do have a very robust project controls process in place in Colin now, being led by one of our senior contracts managers, Willie Loughnane, and we can pull data from that and use it to analyze our own bids and see what's what and see what we can learn from that. Dashboard reporting, so the ability to produce a dashboard specific to a bid, in an automatic manner, and then an on-demand risk report generation. So as you're working your way through the bid, being able to produce progress, risk reports that we can sit around the table and talk about, or we can put to the higher up people in the company and get input on it. So that's a wish list. As I said to you before, I don't have a silver bullet. These things are not all there for me. I haven't seen them anywhere in one place yet. And we're working on maybe put something in place ourselves, but it is something that we are working towards with great gusto. So, summary, I would say to you that risk management can vary greatly from business to business, even in construction. Our appetite and approach to risk could be very, very different than one of our competitors. The digital solution that you select for your risk management needs to meet the needs of your business, and that includes your culture. Don't forget your risk culture, and what's acceptable to your team and your owners and your shareholders. When an industry-specific tool is introduced, it does need to be customizable to the business and the project that it's been used on. You won't get one shoe fits all. It has to be something that we can customize yourself. A risk management platform will need to be able to accommodate multiple data inputs, so drawings, BIM models, PDFs, Word documents, and so on. So that's a given, I think. The object of any such tool would be to systemize and improve the risk process. That's the whole point of the discussion here today. The tool needs to have a collaborative functionality and an overall owner. So within your business, someone has to be responsible for risk. We have many people responsible for risk in our company at different stages. So at the bid stage, it's me, and at the construction stage, it's the contracts manager. They own it. They are the owner. They'll have many people working on it, but they are the owner. The tool will need to facilitate decision making while reducing the associated complexity. So it's about becoming efficient with information, putting the right information in front of the right people, getting the right people to look at the right parts, and that's what they do. So just to close, I would say to you that in the current climate, the best risk mitigation strategy for our industry is for clients and contractors to collaborate. The way things are right now, if you're looking for a fixed price lump sum contract, you're driving your costs through the roof, and you may be driving your contractor into trouble if you do that with the way the market is at the minute. Now, hopefully, these days are going to be behind us soon, but we have to be aware of that. It's the right thing to do at the moment. I would say just thanks to the sponsors and thanks to CitA for allowing me to talk to you today. And I would ask you all to continue to support CitA and everything they do. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Stephen. Great to finish on that point of collaboration. And it's actually interesting, before we go to our next speaker, we've been doing a lot of research in CitA in regard to the future of construction, more about that next year. But actually the one thing that seems to be coming to the surface is that the contractor is going to play a more prominent role in the future. We're seeing across the world consolidation. We're seeing companies like Colin, you mentioned the slow uptake of modularization. That's just going to become more prevalent. So we're going to see contractors becoming more factory owners. and factory fabricators and factories and employ people in a more controlled environment. We're also going to see a move towards green. And actually on Friday, another reason to join us on Friday is we're going to hear from BAM. We're going to hear from John Siskin's son. We're going to hear from Arup. And actually Siemens is a fascinating presentation, because what Siemens are doing is they're becoming a one-stop shop. So maybe this is what's going to happen in this industry, that contractors are going to be the designers, the constructors, and they're going to do three things. They're going to virtually build the digital twin. They're going to build in the factory, modularize, componentize, industrialize this sector, and they're going to be green companies. They're going to think circular. This is the future, and this is what's happening. And to this to happen, you need great technology. And this really brings us to our third speaker, Ciaran. Good afternoon.
Alan, good afternoon. How are you?
And Ciaran, you're the CEO and founder of LiveCost.com, a great company. I know when it was in the early days. You want to take us through your presentation?
Thanks, Alan. You might confirm you can see that.
I can see that. Yes.
Right. Thanks very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Ciaran Brennan. I'm the CEO, co-founder of an Irish construction technology company, LiveCost.com. So, small bit about myself, construction right the way through. Started out labouring on construction sites at 12, 13, 14, through family businesses. Quickly climbed the construction ladder, so to speak. Brought that internationally and spent a lot of time in Australia, in project management sites across Sydney, Perth, Brisbane, and quickly realised that I was probably more interested in the business side of construction than I was in what I was creating with my hands. So started a couple of construction businesses. Some went very well, some didn't go so well. One of them went particularly well, and it was because of our adoption within technology. So we started to investigate solutions to problems we had in our own businesses, quickly finding that the industry was very technically underserved, to a point where we just decided that it was going to be easier for us to build our own solutions than it was to try and find something off a shelf that didn't quite fit our business needs. That led to an exit within our business. So we were acquired, which gave us a little bit of interest to say, well, A, we had some capital to play with it, but B, why wasn't someone else doing what we were doing? So after a quick scan of the market globally, we realized that this was just a wide open opportunity. We founded a company, LiveCost.com, in 2018. Would have spent a lot of time going around speaking to people like Alan about, trying to gather information about the industry. And today we sell a cost management solution into SME construction companies in Ireland, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. And one of the problems that we solve, it was brought up by Eoin and Stephen previously, and just one of the issues that I'll focus in on around is material. So there's a 40-year high spike across material costs, and it's been documented quite well so far in the other presentations. But if we think about that in the practical sense, the go-to solution to manage soaring construction costs that we've seen over the last 2 years or so for SME companies is still Excel spreadsheets. And we think about that for a second, even though credible publications like Forbes have reported that spreadsheets will have 88% of those spreadsheets will contain errors, that's still the go-to solution for an SME company to manage and control costs, which is gone, and that day has passed. In a practical sense, what that looks like is we have someone in the company collecting data from different silos in different projects, trying to collaborate that data into a spreadsheet so we can understand project costs and then take them costs across into a main ERP or accounting software. Everything manual, everything disconnected, everything connected in silos, and it's leading to inaccurate data. And what we've done is we've produced one simple solution to that. One dashboard collecting real-time project data. So for us and our customers, the project is the center of the universe. And there's a lot of different data points that we'll collect and we'll attach to project. So we'll look after the procurement, the delivery of that material. We have developed our own invoice extraction technology, which will basically read and extract information from invoicing so we can do automated three-way matching, material price fluctuation analysis, all that type of stuff. And that's a complete piece of our own technology that we've built here within Blanchardstown. So we collect all these different data points and we attach them then into whatever accounting system, whatever the main financial tool is. But the key part of this is we manage and we track project costs. So the very first one up there is around procurement, and it's what I'd like to focus in on. So we have a practical problem in the market today. And that problem is if we take a piece of paper and we just scratch out a workflow of what a particular issue might look like, our contractors will have a buyer. And a buyer will engage the market with a request for quotation. And traditionally, we'll go out and we'll pop that out to a few suppliers and we'll take in the quotations and they might come back in via email. And that will bring the buyer to a decision and we'll go and create a purchase order for that particular order. This particular simple process is being disrupted by lack of availability. We can't rely on pricing that we might have had at the start of a project. We can't even rely on pricing we might have had last week. And what's happening is our buyers in these companies are in this process, and it's no longer a simple process of going out, being able to engage the marketplace and engage our supply chain and come to a decision. It's back and forth. It's 10 email threads. It's more phone calls. And our customers came to us with a challenge and they said, this is painful. We're spending too much time now engaging our supply chain. We need to automate this workflow and we need to bring this into one place that we can manage this and connect it to other workflows and systems such as the purchase order, the delivery, the invoice, and the final invoicing against project. So we developed something and we said, well, what does the ideal solution look like? And within live costs, we have catalogs, which is where we allow people to basically pop in any suppliers. So we said, well, the ideal solution would be, rather than engaging them via email and phone, it would be a connection straight through to ERP. So we engaged the local merchants, we engaged the top end of industry, as I call it, like companies like Hilti. And unfortunately, the local merchants, their technology infrastructure wouldn't be as sophisticated as let's say, someone at a global level like Hilti that we can understand. So when we want to develop proof of concepts out to what the future of procurement looks like, we can do it at the top end, but we can't do it on a day-to-day practical level with our local merchant. So we started off with, okay, well, let's build what the future looks like. So we connected and we partnered with Hilti. And we said, okay, if I wanted to engage my suppliers, what does that particular look like? And it means that I shouldn't have to leave my buying center. I shouldn't have to leave my procurement process to go and engage my supply chain. So we can open up a simple login to my supplier, which is my credentials. Importantly, using my credentials means that when I open up my supplier's iframe and I'm in my supplier's store, I'm looking at my pricing, I'm looking at my availability, I'm looking at everything that's relatable to me within my supplier's system. So we're able to basically connect the customer's buying center to their supplier. What's beautiful about this process and some of the really interesting data points we took back from this proof of concept with Hilti is that we can go and look and grab line items. And on line items can include specification sheets, as I say, my individual pricing, but I can create a buy list or a punch out list as if I was going to buy the material, but pull that data back to my system. So essentially pull them line items from any supplier back into my system. Why is that nice? Well, first of all, there's three things that I can do then. I could save it to my catalog, which basically means at a couple of presses of a button, I can pull data from my supply chain and have that data available in my system, which allows me to organize and categorize that data in a way that's useful to me. The second thing I can do is I can add it to a request for quotation, meaning that I can engage supplier A, pull in the line items, and then send the descriptions only across to supplier B, C, D, E, or whoever it might be. Or else I could create a purchase order. So rather than me having to leave a system and now go and engage supply chain in 5, 6 different portals, I can gather that information from one portal, but reuse that data in a way that's useful to me as a contractor. When we then looked at that and we said, that's great for the high end, the top end of the industry, but the day-to-day buying with our local merchants are just not ready for that technology. What can we do today that would make this useful for contractors? So we looked at the existing technology we have. As I said, we've developed a piece of machine learning that understands data from PDF documents, and we use that across invoices. So we thought, well, one thing we do know is that when a supplier will engage a contractor with a request for quotation, it's generally going to be sent on a PDF quotation. So why don't we reuse our technology that we've built on invoices to read and extract data from invoices? So we built what's called an RFQ, which allows contractors now to populate catalog from different types of data sources. So materials are soaring, but if we can understand the materials that are coming into the business on a day-to-day basis and be able to understand the analysis and run reports on that by just automating the process and reading the data that's coming into the company, then we have a much better understanding of what's happening at a contracting level. So at the top end of the market, you know, Alan's mentioned companies like CISC, and I'm sure Colin are doing the same, and McDermott are certainly doing it, but like we can understand commodity levels. But if you go into the core of the industry, they're not looking at commodity levels, and they don't have access to the technology that's available to those larger type companies. So what we've given is access to sophisticated technology that was once only available to larger companies. And we do it by reading data that's coming into the company, which means that the more invoicing that the system sees, the more quotations that the system sees, the smarter that data is getting, giving us a better understanding of what's happening on the ground on a day-to-day basis with procurement of material. So we looked at that workflow and we said, well, let's reuse that core piece of technology and let's build it into a request for quotation. I'm going to jump across into live costs and try something here, which is basically a live demonstration. So within live costs, we have analysis. It was Stephen that said, you know, ideally we want dashboards, and dashboards for us are all about cost. We only care about cost. So we've got cost dashboards telling us everything that's gone across the business. When I drill into that at a project level, I just set up a quick project for us here today. We can then pull data from anywhere related to this particular project. So as an example, if I wanted to go out for, let's pull an example, roofing phase on this particular project, and I wanted to go and engage the supply chain, what I can do is I can start to basically, rather than going on a one-to-one journey with many suppliers, I can create one process and go one-to-many. And how it works is I can come into a document section and I can go and create a request for quotation. In the request for quotations here, you can see these are all the requests for quotations that have gone out against this project, all the different suppliers that we've engaged, what prices they've come back in, including all the documentation in relation to that. And how the process essentially works is we can just select many suppliers. So I might walk through this and I might say, I'm going to send a request for quotation to these guys, and I want to send it to these guys as well. And I might also send it out to this particular supplier here. And it basically allows me to build a list of all the suppliers, as many as I like, allocate it to a project. And then we use some practical stuff like, when do we want a date? So when the supplier receives this information, he can clearly see that we need to make a decision on this particular order by this particular date, but I don't require the material on site for a couple of weeks later. These two items are nice, they're practical. Are they in stock? Because that might affect my buying decision. And that's the problem in the industry at the moment. It's been touched on already today. Materials, shortages. Do you as a supplier have this available to me today? Because that might affect my buying decision. Is an exact line item match? So we're talking about a practical sense here. This could be the order for the roof, for example. That roof might have a Velux window specified. Is an exact match? I don't want one of the other ones because we're working with Velux here. Again, one email goes to many suppliers, and I can attach any specifications, whatever else wants to go with that. If I'm populating this order, I can, just simply put a reference, please see attachment. I can also reuse the data that's come in from the catalog. So essentially, as I mentioned, we've got a ton of data pouring into our catalog from invoicing, from quotation, and I can go and draw on that data by simply just looking in and pulling data out of that catalog to go and build this RFQ. Or I can have pre-arranged kits made up. So we already know the roof order, save it as a template, go and pull in the roof order, and it will pull in all the line items that make up that particular roof order. What's nice about this and the repurposing of data is it's giving me an estimated cost. It's telling me that based on the catalog, this order should cost 505. Now there's rules that we can set up around that. And the rules could be that we have a pre-agreed price on 505 with a particular supplier, but maybe I just want to go and check that with 2 or 3 orders before we actually create the order. The second one could be that it's a last buy price. So depending on what rules we set in the catalog, it's giving me an estimated price. But what it's actually doing is it's allowing me to benchmark the replies against something. So what rule do we want to set that against? We can select, and then it gives me something to basically attach to. So we've created one particular document here, and we basically send that out to many suppliers. And as I say, as then replies then come in, what's nice about it is we have that connected into one particular workflow. And all that happens is we have an RFQ number here in a similar way to we scan and extract data from documents. As then replies come in, there's 3 ways a supplier can reply to us. One is they can essentially just send us the email, and it'll basically come in here, or else we can drag and drop the document straight in, and LiveCast will go and scan all that. The second one is that we can actually create a manual reply. So if there was any interactions over the phone, for example, we can actually create a manual. And the third is that they'll actually be invited to a portal, which is a portal customized to my suppliers, where they can just drag and drop documents, create comments, and that will bring that all into one particular workflow, which basically means that I'm engaging all of the suppliers that I've selected against this RFQ. And I have this particular supplier here. I have all the details. I have the documentation. I have the price. I have this particular supplier here, documentation, price. I have this particular supplier here. And if there's more than one reply, I can create a little workflow here with, this is variation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, allowing me to bring this into one place and make an informed buying decision by lining my suppliers up side by side. Now what we need to think about is, how does that relate to the existing workflows in the company? The next step to this is to actually go and create a purchase order. So once I come in here, I can actually convert that to a purchase order, which now associates the cost of the RFQ, allocate it, go a layer deeper, which is to say, listen, I want to allocate this against this phase, go and create the purchase order. And then what we're looking at then is saying that that cost now is automated against that project. What we're actually doing now is the cost will actually attach to its dashboard, line up that cost in here. You can see it's just appeared there. But what we're actually doing is bringing this now into a workflow where I have purchasing being collected in the cloud, sunk into project, allowing me to take deliveries from site then through a mobile app against purchase order, against project, and automate the invoicing and the 3-way matches while collecting the data from the invoicing and sync up to whatever it is, whatever account system or ERP that it is that we use. So I hope that was practical in terms of how customers and SMEs are using technology to deal with some of the problems that are out there today. Thanks, Alan, for the invite.
Thanks, Ciaran, and it's great to see the functionality. You know, you can see the change in the technology, the maturity in the technology since you last spoke at one of our events. And of course, you spoke there about matching. I mean, you know, when it comes to electronic purchasing or e-purchasing, that's I suppose the holy grail is to get the match of the requisition, order, and delivery information, and then you can create the invoice. And I'm sure you potentially looking at you know, POD and proof of delivery on handheld devices in the future and so on. It's, you know, really interesting that in construction, or actually in our world, we use so much smart tech, our phone, our car, our fridge, our TV. But in construction, micro SMEs still use an awful lot of paper. And really, we've got to move on from that. And there's some great solutions like, you know, LiveCast there. And of course, we're going to be moving on now in a second. But just before we move on to AI and to Ahmed, you know, really, I'm involved with Build Digital as well, which CitA are very proud to be involved with Build Digital as the PMO. But, you know, when it comes to digital procurement, really what we're talking about here is just automating repeatable tasks that will boost efficiency and reduce costs. And so it allows really stakeholders across the business with real-time data. So back to that data analytics again. And of course, the future of AI will have a key role. And this leads us into our last two presenters, Dr. Ahmed Hassan, who's one of our scholars in TU Dublin. I'm very, very happy to be working with Ahmed on a successful DTIF project called AI. So Ahmed, if you'd like to bring us through your presentation, and thank you, Ciaran. Please ask your questions. I'm hoping we get a few questions in the chat. Thank you. Thank you, Ahmed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's Ahmed Hassan from Dublin University, and I'm here to show you how we are aiming to test, develop, and exploit the AI technology developed by both innovation companies Evercam and Gagamula to tackle the persistent productivity challenge in the construction industry. Well, a recent Irish official report informed us that the rate of construction productivity in Ireland is 24% below the Euro average. And it was estimated that this productivity gap between construction industry and productivity in other economic sectors in Ireland was worth more than 3 billion over the past 15 years. So we're talking about a problem which is resulting in a huge bill paid by contractors, clients, and Irish taxpayers. In fact, there are several factors contributing to the modest rate of construction productivity. First, we talk about industry fragmentation, the fragmented nature of the construction process, which is making communication and coordination between stakeholders a very complicated thing to do. In addition to the limited off-site production to standardize the construction output, and poor investment in technology by most contracting firms who still prefer to rely on traditional methods and too busy to try new things. And that's not just lead to a modest rate of construction productivity, but also complexity in measuring the actual rate of construction productivity on site. The method which is currently used is a simple way of measuring productivity by just dividing the gross added value of the construction output by the number of labor working hours, which is absolutely not a reliable method, and also a partial measure that doesn't count for other factors of production apart from labor, such as materials, machinery, and the management of the process itself. So the solution Evercam and Gagamula are offering is a visualization platform supported by passive and visual and numerical real-time data in order to coordinate between the numerous stakeholders involved in the construction process and also monitor the factors of production, such as materials, people and machinery. So the AI artificial intelligence visibility platform supporting on-site and off-site communication between project stakeholders is capable of creating a transparent work environment that can potentially improve progress, automate construction deliveries, and minimize the number of accidents by tracking people and equipment. And as the multinational consultancy, McKinsey & Company recently ascertained that visualization platforms are the future of the construction industry across the globe. In a snapshot, these figures show how AI technology works by integrating passive visual data captured by Evercam cameras and numerical data captured by Gagamula sensors. And this data is to feed into the planning system, Load Planner, which is developed by Gagamula, in order to assist with real-time scheduling of activities, and also automated BIM model of the project, in addition to matching the billing process with on-site progress, releasing alerts to prevent safety hazards in the case of any breach detected, and also precise performance analytics to provide precise measures for measuring productivity. Just before starting this video, we'll show one of the main features of the AI technology, which is using passive real-time data for BIM integration. And the video to follow will demonstrate how the technology can match the billing process with actual progress on site. And this is a live real case which happened before that caused a dispute between a client and excavation contractor regarding the quantity of material that has been excavated on site. And using real-time data was capable of identifying trucks been on site, quantity of material has been excavated by the contractor. This can show how real-time data can easily and transparently resolve disputes between construction stakeholders. The project consortium consists of Avecam, the construction visualization experts, and also Gaga Muller, and both firms are technology developers. Avecam will contribute to the project with its cameras technology driven by artificial intelligence. Gaga Muller are mainly contributing with the load planning system and sensors technology to gather numerical data. In addition to Technological University Dublin, the School of Construction Management and Surveying, which is the research performance organization. Our team will consist of senior academics specialized in construction management and innovation and BIM modeling, like Dr. Alan Howard, Mark Melville, myself, and there's a research assistant joining up in the next weeks. And also we have a notable project advisory board come with different professional backgrounds and locations across the world. We have senior directors, academics joining up from Germany, from Saudi Arabia, from Poland, from the USA, and from Ireland as well. Working from academics who like working in senior or notable academic institutions, material suppliers like Kingspan, contracting firms, when we're hoping to gather this diverse expertise in order to develop the technology and exploit it across the whole world. The project is divided into 6 work packages split between the 3 partners, and it's taking place over 3 years duration. The commencement date was last December, and the budget for the project is estimated to be 3.8 million. Enterprise Ireland through the DTIF fund is contributing with 2.09 million. And the practical approach we're following is piloting the technology on live construction sites, firstly in Ireland, and then we hope to conduct that abroad. And this framework was developed by and published by our TU Dublin team to guide the industrial research process over the project duration. It's a mixed method research journey that will combine quantitative and qualitative data to accomplish our objectives. So firstly, we will rely on quantitative data to measure the benefits of applying AI on construction sites with respect to productivity and sustainability. And also will conduct in-depth interviews in order to identify challenges to technology adoption, such as cultural issues, skills, shortage, ethics, initial cost, and internet connectivity. And we're hoping that after the 3 years phase, we're going to be ready to go for the next phase of the project, which is technology commercialization. I would be more than happy to invite you following our page on LinkedIn. And if you've got any questions, I'm also happy to respond to you by connecting with me on LinkedIn as well through my profile. Thanks for listening, and I'm looking forward to answer your questions during the Q&A session.
Thanks, Ahmed. So actually being involved in this project direct, it's another indication of the importance of collaboration. This is effectively an Irish government funded project who recognize and encourage submissions to their Disruptive Technology Innovation Fund, where there's a partnership between tech companies and contractors in this particular instance. So this is a industrial research project. And as a consequence, there may be a number of cul-de-sacs that we might have to go down. There's a disruptive element to it as well. We just can't go filming people and publishing this data. There has to be, I suppose, a protocol. We have to respect GDPR. We have to, and all of that. So there's an element of learning as we go. But Ahmed mentioned the the advisory board. We've got people from Saudi Arabia, the United States, Germany, UK, and these are in some cases very, very senior construction people, and they're working for very large contractors, and they are genuinely interested in this solution. So this could be two great Irish companies, tech companies, creating a new solution for construction that will help us manage our resource better and reduce our costs. So great. Thank you, Ahmed, for a really great presentation. And so please, I don't see any questions in the chat. I mean, the quality of these presenters is world class. No pressure, Sharon. Sharon is up next. Last but not least, Dr. Sharon Richardson from Databricks. So Sharon, you're going to be maybe talking a little bit more about the power of AI and so on. And of course, you've got cross-sectoral experience here, not just in construction. So we're looking forward to your presentation. I'd like to share your presentation with us.
I will. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely great. Yeah.
Perfect. My Wi-Fi has been frustratingly a little wobbly, so do please interrupt if I break up, and I'll do a pause while it settles back down. And hopefully you can see my slides okay.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Wonderful. I shall get started straight away. So hi, everyone. I am Sharon Richardson. I'm a data and AI strategist at Databricks. My background, because as Alan quite rightly points out, I am not somebody inside the construction industry. But if it helps know a little bit about my background, I have a PhD in cognitive and spatial data science. I have a 30-year career in the IT industry in a guise of different forms as data and technologies disrupted so many aspects of our lives. But a few years ago, got very interested in the smart city narrative and chose to take a career break and went back into academia to do a master's in smart cities and urban analytics. And that led on to the PhD. And since then, I've come back out into industry within the tech industry, into Databricks. If you've never heard of Databricks, hopefully you might have, but if you haven't, we call ourselves the data and AI company. It's the inventor and pioneer of what's called a data lakehouse. It's offering a cloud-based data, analytics, and AI all together on a single platform. And why that kind of is interesting is that we now see ourselves as recognized as leader in 2 quadrants with Gartner for the database management systems and also the data science and machine learning platforms. And we're the only company to achieve that, because these 2 worlds have not been friends over the years. And I come much more from the data science side. Database management and data warehousing has been very much about handling very structured, very clean, very controlled numeric data into warehouses. And then in the last decade or so, we saw the rise of data lakes, which was about working with all the other stuff. So text, audio, video, sensors, noisy, messy, real world data that doesn't tend to conform well to these structured tables that the data warehouses manage. So we have these 2 things of data warehouse and data lake, and lakehouse is exactly what it sounds like. It's about bringing the 2 together. And why we think that's important is this data and AI maturity curve that we're really seeing start to accelerate in some industries more than others, but without doubt impacting all industries as we move through time. And if you think about what we've done for many, many years with statistics and even with computational statistics and to an element of machine learning, we tend to have focused on what has happened, hindsight. We clean the data, we can produce descriptive statistics, we can analyze it diagnostically, we can start to explore it a bit more, but we're still tending to look at what has happened. And the acceleration that we've seen with AI is moving more into foresight. Can we start to anticipate better what will or may happen through predictive modeling? Can we go a step further? Because if we make a prediction, it's generally a recommendation still based to some extent on what's happened in the past. Prescriptive analytics is taking it to the next stage. Can we start to simulate different responses, and can we evaluate what it means by these different responses? And ultimately, we're moving up to cognitive automation. And Alan touched a little bit earlier on. There's actually a step before that, between sort of data exploration and predictive modeling, is what we call robotic process automation. And that's where you can automate very repeatable processes because they're quite stable, they're quite consistent. They're just a pain, frankly, to do manually. So if we can automate them, anything where you copy and cut and paste in multiple spreadsheets, that's ripe for automation. Let's get it done. Cognitive automation is the next level up, though, where the system can start to become self-healing and adaptive as it learns over time so many more environmental variables. And so this has huge potential within the construction industry, because everything you do, unless you're a company that's moving to the metaverse, everything that you do is in the physical world. And so if we look at the potential of real-time AI, I would argue it's all about applying observational data, these data traces that we're starting to collect in real time in our environments, applying them with algorithms to inform decisions in or about real-world situations. And so it's really this level from going from predicting, where we're sort of anticipating something, making a recommendation, to prescribing, where we're learning and adapting, to automating, where we fully sense and intervene. If we just touch on each of those in a little bit more detail, predict is perhaps the most well-known across most industries, and I would argue it's probably well-known to an extent now in construction as well, because the most common scenario is predictive maintenance. Can we start to detect anomalies and anticipate failures before they're even visible to humans or to experts? And so this graphic just shows you that if you think about when a failure first begins to happen, it may be very, very hard to detect it, but there may be subtle changes. And that's what we find with machine learning and AI. We can pick up those subtleties that are completely invisible to the human eye, even with the most skilled detection. And by the time anyone can observe it, generally the system is failing. And the further you get to the point where the system breaks, generally the higher the repair costs. But it's more than that too. I mean, the potential of doing predictive maintenance and the production monitoring is dramatic reduction in waste too, because before we could predict a failure on a single component, we would average. So it might be you have sensors and say, well, on average, they last about 6 months. But there might be great variance in that. Some might break after a month and some might last 2 years. And so if you replace them all at 6 months, you're going to have failures. That mean there's going to be points where it's broken, so you have to send somebody on a special request to fix. And you're going to replace items that actually have a lot of working life left in them. That's actually on every level of waste bad. So predictions, being able to predict the likelihood of failure and get closer to that window, has huge, huge potential benefits. We talk about it in terms of maintaining, such as equipment maintenance, but there's other aspects too that could be beneficial to the construction industry. And that's being able to monitor production. So if you're producing, say, pipes out of sheets of metal, being able to predict that there's a subtle degradation in the production of the mass production of these pipes and stopping immediately can be a massive saving of raw material, instead of producing an entire batch of pipes that get thrown away because they've got flaws in them. Detecting the flaws at the point of creation can be a huge benefit to saving raw materials. If we take it on to the next level, prescribe, this is when we're starting to look more holistically and looking to evaluate and simulate based on real-world observations. And we've just seen a great example of that in the previous session. And I believe we've got a dedicated session to digital twins tomorrow as well. So I won't dwell too much on this, but it's really about bringing in spatial data, IoT data, architectural data all together and having a much better understanding of the environment. It can be for monitoring live, as in with the digital twins. It's also invaluable for local prototyping too. So something that might previously have been prototyped in a physical way can be done fully digitally. So again, a massive saving in terms of not using raw materials with unnecessarily. A further example, we're starting to see this being used, and it's actually a case study within Databricks ecosystem, is this concept of complex construction sequencing too. So actually at the start of very complex construction projects, running through multiple different sequences to identify, are we actually planning this in the correct order? Is there a better way of doing things? And so that's probably links really into the benefits at the prescription level. It's not just about optimizing resources. It's this huge potential to innovate without any material waste, but also discover as well, maybe discover a better way of doing things, because we can run these simulations so fast and so many times in ways that humans simply could not before. And then up to the third level, and it's the most advanced level, so it gets the funkiest picture that I managed to grab off the internet as an example. And that's where can we fully take the human out of the loop in the decision making? We've seen a lot of debates with this around autonomous vehicles. I find it really interesting that there was a huge hype around that we would see autonomous vehicles on our roads everywhere. But actually, most people now kind of step back a little bit and realize some of the complex challenges to overcome. Where we are seeing a rise, though, is the use of autonomous vehicles in controlled environments. So we're seeing sensors being fitted to forklift trucks, for example, because injuries from forklift trucks going where they shouldn't are very, very bad. But also cobots too. The idea that environments where robots and humans need to coexist together, they're working together, how can we make that as safe as possible? And AI AI has a huge, huge role to play here, to sense, to intervene as quickly as possible if it's perceived that there's a safety risk. And there's another aspect too. It's a phrase I actually admit I only came across quite recently, which is this term of industrial athletes. And it's recognizing that I've seen the use of physiological sensors on the body to start helping monitoring people as they're working for signs of fatigue or stress that could put themselves into an unsafe situation. But it's also a way of optimizing productivity too, because as you start to get tired, your work quality will degrade, maybe sometimes take a rest, and that's the right thing to do. And having the sensors to help can be very useful here at two different levels. I mean, we talk a lot about it's a great way of helping inexperienced people that maybe are being trained up onto the job. It can help guide, help monitor their performance. But actually, some of the biggest safety risks are taken by the most experienced people, because as we develop experience and age, we can develop an overconfidence and feel that actually we're okay, we can manage this. And sensors might say, no, really, don't do that. So at both ends, this idea of industrial athletes, I think, is a fascinating way of describing how we can use IoT and AI to really augment us, to help us be more performant in our environments, whatever that environment might be. And linking this into Build Digital, and Alan kindly shared some of this information with me beforehand, so I very much have framed this talk around it, but focusing very much on what the interest of today's talk's been around is how do we get from this idea of focusing on cost, time and quality towards value, carbon and safety, and bringing collaborative procurement. And I would say all three levels of AI have got so much to offer across these three areas, from prediction, very much around increasing efficiency. For carbon, well, anything that optimizes use of resources is going to be a good outcome. But from safety, being able to anticipate when to reach thresholds, and all the way through, I would say we get a strong tick for how AI can be useful in this area. But I just wanted to touch, and I will be quite quick here, so I'm happy to follow up with anyone and during the questions too. But what are some of the trends that we're seeing that maybe could have an impact on the construction industry? And the biggest one of all is the one that covers them all, which is the acceleration we're seeing in breakthroughs. I don't know if any of you follow the xkcd.com cartoons, but they're very good at putting concise, almost sharp points about reality into a single cartoon, but sometimes it goes wrong. And this is one, this was published on the left in September 2014. It's like, when a user takes a photo, the app should check whether they're in a national park. Response, sure, easy GIS lookup, give me a few hours. And it does take a few hours because spatial lookups are a lot more complicated than single dimension ones. But then the add-on, and check whether the photo is of a bird. I'll need a research team in 5 years. Because it was still perceived, even in 2014, we were not going to get computer vision anywhere close to the level of human vision in object detection. And then in February 2015, Microsoft Research announced that for the first time, they'd built an algorithm that outperformed humans in the classification of objects in natural settings as part of the ImageNet challenge. And this was seen as a huge breakthrough at the time because nobody expected it for another decade. But this has actually been a bit of a constant theme over the last decade. I've just put here, I use this in various guises. This is a timeline now stretching about 16 years from really what triggered the current bloom that we've had in AI and AI advancements, which was this deep learning paper by Geoffrey Hinton et al. He published it in 2006, and it was a breakthrough paper about how to use neural networks in a way that could actually produce more efficient results, because they were invented a long time ago, but we just didn't have the compute power to realize them. 3 years later, there was a supporting paper which was identified the use of the graphics processing unit within a computer was far more suited to deep learning than the central processing unit. And so NVIDIA were very involved in this. And that led to a rapid acceleration around computer vision. And actually in 2011, for the first time, we saw algorithms at least able to recognize and classify high resolution images. They still weren't very good at it. The accuracy was way below human, but it was a step change compared to what had been achieved before. But then by 2015, things really have sped up a lot. This is when the Microsoft computer vision outperformed the humans in the ImageNet classification. We saw DeepMind, which is part of Google, their AlphaGo won a Go game against a human champion. Again, people thought this was a decade or more away. And what really became interesting is Google launched TensorFlow, which was an open source neural network library AI. And that just opened the field of development around neural networks to such a much wider audience, because previously it was very closed. It was privy to a few tech companies and a few academic establishments that were aligned with them, but it was not something that was available to everyone. Really changed the field of AI. They also, interestingly, launched their own tensor processing units, which was based on this concept of using GPUs, how to use I always stumble on this word, parallelize, got it out, the processes to speed up computing. And really from that point on, it's just got faster and faster. In 2017, DeepMind's AlphaGo Zero beat the #1 world ranked human player at Go, to the point that that player said, I think it's over now, because AlphaGo Zero learned so quickly what took decades for a champion to learn. But the next breakthrough, because at this point it was still around about computer vision and a certain amount of game playing, we saw the arrival of transformer language models. It was a paper proposed in 2017. And then in 2018, we saw AlphaFold carrying on through its route. I'll come back to that. But by 2019, within 2 years of that paper, we got GPT-2, which was the open AI language model, 1.5 billion parameters. A year later, GPT-3, 175 billion parameters. A year later, Microsoft and NVIDIA launched theirs with 530 billion parameters. Bets are on now for when we go over 1 trillion parameters. And if you've been watching any news around AI in the last week, there is a huge debate going on right now as to whether or not Google's language model, Lambda, is sentient. And I'm happy to have fun discussing that during the Q&A if anyone's interested. The other breakthroughs too, which I just skipped from, was AlphaFold, which was the switch of using alphas compute algorithms from gameplay into real-world challenges, tackling biology and protein folding. Their first attempt at the Casper protein folding competition, which was the gold standard, which achieved an average score of 58%, which put it in first place above all humans, but still a long way from the 90% bar considered needed for it to be deemed a solved challenge. 2 years later, it's a biannual competition. AlphaFold went in again and it won again. And this time it achieved that score. It went over 90%. People thought we were 30 years away from achieving this. It's transforming the field of biology. These are the kinds of disruptions we're seeing in AI, and that there's no industry that couldn't benefit from some of the processes that we're seeing come through here. So the World Economic Forum actually published a report last year on what they perceive to be the 4 factors driving the AI economy. They center around very much data, so big data in particular, real world evidence, the kind of live data that's essential to the construction industry. Processing power in the cloud, also an absolutely huge thing, because it's this separation. In the past, we used a computer or a bank of computers. What we're seeing now is a separation. So we have low-cost storage where we put all the data. And we have a separate layer of compute where we can query, analyze, and model from that data. The low-cost storage is infinitely scalable in size, and the compute is completely elastic. If you need a small model today, you use a small amount of compute. If you need a big model tomorrow, you use a massive amount of compute. And this is very valuable for organizations that have very spiky needs to access more compute power. We're seeing new algorithm types, and the Alpha series has really pushed through with that. But also at a more serious level, there are socio-political factors to consider as well. There are differences in approaches, both to data privacy and funding and controlling of AI research. And there's a lot of different social and cultural expectations for ethical, responsible, and most importantly, sustainable AI, because the concerns around carbon costs have been targeted at AI as well. These models can be very heavy to compute. There's a carbon cost involved, so they have to be worth computing. I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to skip through the rest of the slides. I'll share them afterwards. I'm happy to follow into the discussion, but I think just hitting some key points. First is we talk about all this data, but a key concern is always who owns the data. And that's very applicable, for example, if you're doing a construction project. It's the running of the projects afterwards too, particularly infrastructure such as transport. If we're deploying all these sensors for predictive maintenance, who actually owns the data? It's some interesting questions, and also around the accuracy of the data. I'm going to skip through this just to say that what we're seeing, machine learning's made huge advances, but what we're starting to see at an industry level is the need to scale its use within industry. It means we need the machines to do their own learning. And so we see this thing called automatic machine learning, or AutoML. And it's about taking away 80% of the effort of data scientists, which is often around preparing and building the models and automating that process. I've touched on this, so I'm going to just skip because I have a clock keeping an eye on the time. But I will just bring up this one case study because it's relevant. Colas, they're a French civil engineering firm, so they work on transportation projects. And they have over 50 subsidiaries spread around the world. And in 2019, they were starting to think about, how do we bring our data together? How do we start to use it better across our business in multiple different ways? And so Databricks was working with them to bring them onto a platform. Then COVID happened, and it actually forced them to accelerate the process. Because they were already partway through that journey, they were able to go into production, which meant a number of their teams, their architects, their data scientists, were able to continue working during COVID and lockdown because the data was on the cloud and they were all able to access it from home. But a key part for them was actually what happened when lockdown started to ease off, because they had over 15,000 construction sites that had to be stopped. And what they did was they used machine learning and modeling to figure out how on earth do we reopen these in the most ordered way possible? What's the right order to bring these sites back online? How do we incorporate data about COVID rates, COVID lockdown situations in these different countries? So it's a really interesting, unexpected case study of the use of a cloud-based platform informing their industry decisions. Socio-political factors, I will skip because most of these have actually been touched on very well in a couple of the earlier sessions. So we'll just close out to say that there are huge opportunities, without a doubt, I believe, for AI to come more into the construction industry. Definitely there are challenges as well, but I think there's more upside than down, without a doubt, for bringing AI into this Build Digital project. I'll close out with just very quickly, if you're interested in data and AI and any of this and what other industries and businesses are doing with data and AI, we have a summit at the end of the month. If you want to go to San Francisco, you can, but it's freely available. It's being broadcast, live streamed online for free. You just have to register. So if it's interesting, please go. But with that, I hope it's been interesting. I'd like to say thank you.
Yeah, fascinating, Sharon. Really, really fascinating. I learned so much about predictive, prescriptive, cognitive automation, and so on. And, you know, back to the earlier point that I made, and actually some of the other speakers made it, that, you know, AI will, and ML or machine learning will transform the construction industry. It's already providing, you know, the next generation, you know, experience, and could well give clients the virtual digital experience that they need prior to construction. And it's definitely going to play a role in climate change. If we were to quote Elon Musk, obviously he's quite provocative. He talks about AI doesn't have to be evil to destroy humanity, but watch this space. It will dramatically change the way that we as humans work. And we do not need to be doing repeatable tasks. We do not need to be using the paper. Even while I'm sitting at this desk with all these wires all around me, what's going to be like in 10 years' time? Our batteries will be replenished automatically through Wi-Fi. The whole world is going to change, and we're going to be, you know, in a more virtual, but hopefully leaner, safer, greener world for the next generation. So what can I say about these presentations? I always say this, and of course I wouldn't I? But the quality was world class. The quality. CitA is about quality events, quality speakers, quality messages, and that's what we really got out of today. You know, really, you know, 5 very, very, very good presentations, and there's so many questions. And do we have some questions for our speakers? So let me have a quick look at the chat. So thank you everyone for joining us. And so I'm going to just Dan O'Gorman, and actually Dan, you could come in on the mic as well. I think Ralph, you had a comment about in an environment where clients want to sign contracts and expect to start almost immediately on site, where can we find the time to do all of this useful analytic work? Anyone want to take that one?
I mean, I can make a start if you like.
Yes, yeah.
Because it's an age-old analogy is the wrong word. It's like a story, but you may have heard of it, sharpen the saw. And it's the whole story of, you know, somebody that they're in a wood, they have to chop down trees, and they're frantically trying to chop down the tree, but their saw is completely blunt. And somebody walks up to me and says, I've got this tool here that will sharpen your saw for you, but you've got to stop chopping down trees for a while just to sharpen it. And it's like, I have no time to stop. I've got to chop down the next tree. And it's a great example, because if you just stopped for that moment and sharpened the saw, actually the next trees are going to chop down a lot quicker. It's that productivity gain. The challenge is the unknown, because it requires almost a pause to step back. We don't know for certain that we're going to get the outcome that we want. So the advice I advise a lot of people in terms of how they adopt AI and data strategy in general, and it's always a mix between long-term planning and short-term wins. So how can you execute very quickly to do something for positive, but also have some longer-term plans that are going to take longer to execute. So for this, there has to be a balance. If literally you're in an environment where there's no time to stop, you're going to ultimately be outperformed by someone who does find the time to optimize and innovate. And of course, that's the risk.
That's the issue. And of course, we're working with antiquated systems. I mean, this is a recorded session. I'll probably get sacked for saying this, but I'm head of quantity surveying in TU Dublin, one of the largest universities in the country. Perhaps we shouldn't be producing bills of quantities in the way they're producing them. The idea that you try to quantify information that's largely uncoordinated is really, it's not really good practice. As soon as the bill of quantities is printed or shared digitally, it's out of date. You're actually creating a document which is inviting people to claim for extra money. So what you need is complete design. Obviously that's utopia, but maybe we should be thinking about the work that we do is, so we have to think digitally and use digital to enable automation and better risk management. So thanks, Sharon. Any other questions there?
Just Alan, to take your invite there. I mean, the question I was raising there was planning. Given the technologies that are available in the legal profession using AI for analysis of contracts, when and how can we get to a position where engineers and designers tasked with getting planning approval can use AI tools, first of all, to guide them that their drawings and specifications are compliant, but secondly, the guys on the other side of the fence who are doing approval can simply use AI to actually cross-check and validate what has been submitted and give faster approvals to the planning, because this is the biggest hurdle that any developer in Ireland has to face today, even if their FDI, talking to somebody this morning, where a 1.2 billion euro project is held up because people have to wait until August to check if barley will flower or not in a field that they want to use. I mean, this is ludicrous. So, I mean, go back to the question: is the legal profession, the banks are using AI to smooth out approval of contracts. What is required to do it for planning approval?
Yeah.
Well, what is required?
I don't know if we have any planning experts with us this morning, but certainly.
But from an AI perspective, I should have.
AI perspective.
From an AI perspective,
I don't want to dominate the responses, so I'll make this the last one and force the other speakers to answer the rest of the questions. I was just quickly checking on LinkedIn, because there's at least one company I know that's looking at tackling this challenge, at least from the submitters side, because it was actually a co-PhD student who's ex-Intel, and he's set up a business in Dublin doing exactly this, looking at how can you turn AI onto the planning process, how can you speed up gathering of the documents, verifying the documents, is there ground truthing requirement, for example. So if you're interested, I will look him up, because I embarrassingly cannot remember the name of the company. If it's of interest, I'll look it up. But there's definitely research there. On the other side, obviously, that's another challenge entirely, which is tackling the governmental processes around planning. I mean, AI can absolutely help in terms of automating things where possible, but a lot of it is in business inertia. It's inertia in the processes that needs to be resolved. Rather, it's not even a technology problem. The technologies are absolutely there. It's organizational processes to adopt them.
Yeah, I think, is that coming from Ralph that this company is Smart PMO, and they're presenting on Friday at the Gibson.
Okay, that's excellent.
Yeah,
that's good. That's good news. Thanks very much for the answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Okay, I might ask a question there from DH for Ciaran Brennan. Great presentation and looks like a great platform. in addition to procuring individual products, has Ciaran also tackled the problem of pricing whole subcontracts and systems and pulling the required information, specs, and the quantities from the models and linked data? Is that the next step, or is this in your horizon?
Good question. Yeah. So the answer to is comes down to structure of documents. So we're essentially playing at a small level around AI machine learning, and why we can do what we do with suppliers is they have a structured, consistent document. When we go to the subbies, they're not quite structured and consistent. So if we use the local merchants, for example, and we look at, let's say, the famous ones around us, they're not too far from where any of us are sitting today, like Chadwick's and these type of guys. They have a structured document. It comes out of ERP. We can see product code, we can see description, we can see price, and we can use algorithms to run across them documents consistently. When it comes to subcontractors, we get inconsistency, which means it's more difficult for us to do. In saying that, we're doing it because it's a huge challenge. So today on the platform, it's more of a manual process in taking the data and adding them to a workflow, and it's not quite as slick as what we can do with product codes. But it's something that we are certainly looking at, and it's a challenge.
Yeah, thanks, Ciaran. And like any product, it's constantly developing, isn't it? And of course, you possibly have investors as well in your technology, and so on. So I've just got one question for Eoin there. What type of advice are you giving your clients today about inflation and perhaps what they would be doing? I mean, you mentioned the OGP's inflation framework there, and I'm sure that's been hopefully well received by the public sector, contractors. But what type of advice are you giving them? What decisions
I suppose
are you?
it's I'm going to give you the answer that probably you don't like, but it does vary on sector and client and project. I mean, we are seeing, a preference from as I mentioned, the contractors and the pool of contractors are very busy at the moment at all levels, and they're probably a bit more selective of what stuff they would like to go after. I mean, residential, whilst has a huge demand at the moment and the projects have their challenges from viability, for a lot of contractors it's probably not number one on the agenda for going after those projects, because they're a bit more challenging with coordination of services and all the rest of it, whereas more commercial data center, industrial type stuff are a bit more attractive for them to go after. So it does depend on the sector. For the residential probably type stuff, again, depending on the circumstances. I mean, Stephen touched on it briefly in his presentation, was it's having those discussions early. So you almost have to go and sell the project to the industry and trying to get a partner, if you want, on board early, because waiting for the design to get done, doing a hard tender, negotiating. I mean, months and months pass, and I suppose costs are remaining volatile, and it's difficult to try to nail stuff down. So I suppose in parallel to the design development, having those conversations early, engaging specialist subcontractors, because I suppose you take like facades, M&E, all those big chunky items. If you can have those conversations early with those specialist subcontractors, get their buy-in to the job, and the design can benefit from their input at the end of the day. So they can offer some like buildability advice and all the rest of it.
Is it a matter at tender stage to kind of, maybe Stephen can come in, is it a matter kind of to identify the baseline material cost at tender stage?
It's a different...
And then when it comes to contract signing or contract negotiation, then there's an acceptance by the client and the contractor that price would be recompensed, that fluctuation would be taken into account, because the contractor, let's face it, the contractor should not take the risk.
Correct. And it's a difficult thing to do. And I mean, under the public works contract, that cooperation framework that they brought in, they're linking it back to the wholesale price index. So that's an index that at the point in time of the tender, the contract award, and at the point in time of the works or the costs you actually measure. I suppose on the private sector side, it's varying from project to project. It's one thing that we would probably look for as an industry in ourselves is we almost need a set of an agreed set of approaches for working in this type of inflationary market, because it's very much project specific. So with certain clients that will adopt that approach and be quite happy to do it. Other clients taking a bit more of a hard line approach and saying it's the contractor's risk. So
but of course, it brings in that whole. I mean, I'm a former contractors QS myself. It brings in, where you made your money potentially was in the buying. You had so much in the bill of quantities for your materials, but you went out then to the market and said, okay, we won. Now we need the real price. Now we need a commercial price. So that kind of commercial function of the contractor to kind of buy at the best price is really challenging. And actually, I suppose it depends a lot on the depth of the client's pockets, does it not? A developer can just add on these costs.
Yes, it does. It does in certain instances. And look, it depends on that relationship as well. That I suppose if the discussions and negotiations are quite collaborative and open from the outset, and there's a trust. Because I suppose as an industry, trust is the one thing we're not very good. There's always that client versus contractor. The trust, I suppose, is one thing that's lacking. If that's there and there's an understanding in terms of what is the base point, and then how are we going to deal with hyperinflation? So let's take steel, let's take energy costs. How are we going to deal with those if they come up in the project? And you kind of try to carve out those risk areas.
Yeah, thanks very much. And of course, Ralph is putting in some very useful links there. And what we'll do is we'll obviously this will be recorded. This will be available to the wider industry. I mean, we've had very good turnout today. It's a pity there isn't any, chief information officers at this presentation, because I think they would have learned an awful lot from what was said today, this afternoon. And we'll also try and capture those links that Ralph and other people have provided. So, Ciaran, quick question for you, if I may, unless there's anyone else who come in with a question. What can you see, or what is it that needs to unlock the more an increased use of technology by, say, the micro companies, the contractors? What is it that will make them change?
I don't believe that they aren't using technology, because any customer that we deal with, and we are in that SME place, we find that they are using technology. They use WhatsApp, they use email. The problem, Alan, is that it's disconnected and it's in silos. It's not connected processes. So they use accounting softwares, they use estimating softwares like BillSoft and all these type of things. So there's quite a lot of technology around the company. It's just not connected. So the question is more so for us is how can we get them to connect these technologies together? It's all about integration for us. There'll never be a one size fits all ERP that comes out and takes the whole industry.
Maybe that's where there's a role for the likes of the Alliance going forward, that that connecting you to innovation is the strapline that we've always used. That there could be something that we could do maybe in 23 to kind of promote that a bit more, that we're technology agnostic, we're independent, all of that's multi-stakeholder. So that's really interesting. So listen, we're just coming towards the end. Unless we've any more questions, I might bring this particular day one event to a close. What can I say? The quality just shone through today. The challenges or the challenges that were set forth by the members, I think, were the correct one. The big one was resource scarcity and procurement reform and increased costs today. Didn't hear too much about modularization. More about that tomorrow. But on Friday, here's just some of the companies that'll be with you on Friday: John Siskin Son, Siemens, Arab, BRE Group, BAM, Future Planet, Modularize, Celebri, Borough Halpert. You can't miss this event. This is going to be a fantastic event. And we're going to try and bring all this together on Friday for you all. We've got some world-class sponsors as well, who I mentioned earlier, and a world-class team behind the scene. I see Suzanne there. I know Eleni is there. Ellen, Sam in the background. Absolutely fantastic people. And we would not be able to do this without your help. Listen, why are CitA here? CitA are there to so that we can be stronger together than separately. This was the mission we set out 22 years ago. We're still here. It's not about the quantity, it's about the quality of what we do every day. So thank you so much to our speakers this morning, to Eoin, to Stephen, to Ciaran, Ahmed and Sharon. Respect to you all, best health to you all, and we shall hopefully see you in the future. We're big fans of what you guys do. And please pass my regards on to Paul as well, Eoin, for I wish everyone the best in Mission McDermott. So thank you so much. Have I forgotten anything, Suzanne?
No, I think that's great. Thanks a million, everyone. That was a super, super event. Thanks so much. Thanks, Alan.
Yeah. So we'll see you tomorrow, which is climate change and climate action. Any of you watching RT1 last night, which is, Sharon, just for you, it's our television station, it's our BBC in Ireland. They talked about thinking in a circular way, no longer in a linear way. So we need to recycle and reuse. And
you must be aware that Amsterdam's announced and is put a mandate on all companies, to adopt circular economy.
And Amsterdam was featured in that program, and everyone, whether you're a tech company, a contractor, an architect, an engineer, think circular. This last year, actually, we did a circular economy series. People were surprised what our CitA doing that for, because we can predict what's going to happen in the future. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, and
thank you, Alan.
Stay safe. Take
Thanks,
care.
Alan.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Alan.
Goodbye.